The first time Nolan asked me to move in with him for a month, I laughed because I thought he was joking. Nolan stared across the parking lot. We were sitting on the hood of his truck outside the apartment building we'd both lived in for almost a year, finishing off greasy burgers after helping one of our classmates move. It was late May. Finals were finally over, and everyone was talking about summer jobs, internships, or trips home. Carter stared across the parking lot, taking another bite before saying it like it wasn't a big deal. Nolan and I had been friends for almost 2 years. They don't want the house sitting empty. Also, good for them. He nudged my shoulder. They told me to invite someone if I wanted. I raised an eyebrow. So come live with me for a month. I blinked. In your parents' house? Yeah. For an entire month? He shrugged. Why not? Because people didn't just casually ask someone to move in for a month. At least not in my experience. Carter and I had been friends for almost 2 years. We met during our sophomore year after being assigned to the same marketing project. You'd have your own room, Nolan continued. That was it. The kind of guy who could start talking to anyone in line for coffee and somehow end up invited to their birthday party. I preferred watching conversations before joining them. He played basketball 3 nights a week. I spent those nights reading or working on freelance graphic design projects. He woke up before 7 every morning. I considered 10 o'clock an achievement. Somehow it worked. What about your roommates? I asked. They're going home and mine are staying. Exactly, I frowned. I don't see how that's exactly. You've complained about them for 6 months. He wasn't wrong. One roommate had developed an obsession with practicing guitar after midnight. The other treated dirty dishes like decorative furniture. You'd have your own room, Carter continued. My parents have 4 bedrooms. We basically have the place to ourselves. I laughed again. You've already planned this. Nolan was straight. He looked genuinely confused by the question. Because it would be fun. That simple. No hidden meaning, no complicated explanation, just because it would be fun. I should probably explain something. I was openly gay. Not loudly, not secretly, just openly. My friends knew, my classmates knew, my roommates knew. It had never been a dramatic announcement. If someone asked whether I was dating anyone, I'd answer honestly. That was it. Carter was straight. As far as I knew, he'd only dated women. He talked about ex-girlfriends occasionally, but I learned long ago that proximity had a funny way of making emotions difficult. Mostly funny stories about relationships that clearly hadn't worked. The idea of living with him for a month sounded complicated. Not because I expected anything to happen. I didn't. But I learned long ago that proximity had a funny way of making emotions difficult, especially when someone was attractive. And Nolan definitely was. Nolan leaned against the front door, arms crossed, different depending on the weather. The kind of smile that made strangers smile back automatically. I'd noticed all those things months ago. Then I'd filed them away under absolutely not. He was my friend. That was enough. You thinking? He asked, trying to... Don't think too hard. I have to. No, you don't, he grinned. My mom already said yes. I stared at him. You asked your mom before asking me? I knew you'd overthink it. I am not. You were literally overthinking it right now. I sighed. I have work. You work online. I still have clients. My house has Wi-Fi. I know your house has Wi-Fi. So I couldn't find another excuse because the truth was I wanted to say yes. Maybe a little too much. 3 days later, I was standing in front of a 2-story house that looked like it belonged in one of those neighborhoods where people actually knew their neighbors' names. Carter leaned against the front door, arms crossed. You brought way too much stuff. I packed 1 suitcase and 2 backpacks. Nolan made coffee every morning before I even woke up. I read. I know, it's weird. I rolled my eyes. You invited me. I did. He grabbed one of my bags before I could protest. Come on. The house felt warm before we even stepped inside. Not temperature, atmosphere. Family photos covered one wall of the hallway. Vacation pictures, graduation photos, birthday parties, years of memories arranged in matching frames. This is nice, I admitted. My mom's obsessed with photos. I can tell. He pointed upstairs. Your room's at the end of the hall. My room? Yeah. The words sounded strangely significant. My room, not the guest room, not somewhere temporary, just my room. He pushed open the door. The bedroom overlooked the backyard. A queen-sized bed, large desk, bookshelf, a window seat with cushions. Someone had clearly made the bed that morning. My mom insisted everything had to be perfect. It already was. He smiled. She likes you. I've met her once. Exactly. I laughed. That's not how that works. It is for her. He dropped my bag onto the floor. Bathroom's across the hall. I can probably find it. Kitchen's downstairs, I assumed. Living room, I noticed. He folded his arms. You done making fun of me? Maybe. He looked around the room. So welcome home. The words landed somewhere unexpected. Home for 1 month. I told myself not to read into it. The first few days settled into an easy routine faster than I expected. That was the problem with Nolan. He claimed I looked less terrifying after caffeine. I told him he looked exactly the same before and after. He considered that a compliment. He'd head to the gym while I answered emails and work from the desk in my room. Around lunchtime, one of us would wander downstairs and ask the same question. "You hungry?" The answer was always yes. Sometimes we'd cook. Usually, we'd fail. By the end of the first week, we'd already managed to burn grilled cheese, undercooked pasta, and somehow ruined frozen pizza. "I don't understand," I said one evening, staring at the blackened crust. "It literally came with instructions. I followed them. You set the oven 20 degrees too high. It said 400. It said 375. Those numbers are basically neighbors." He laughed so hard he nearly dropped the pizza cutter. "You know what?" "What?" "I think you're dangerous. I made one mistake. You've made 12. I've only lived here 6 days. "Exactly." He pointed dramatically toward the smoke detector. "That thing is developing trust issues." I couldn't help laughing, too. That was the problem with Carter. Halfway through organizing shelves, Nolan disappeared into another room. One Friday evening, we decided to clean the garage because his father had left a long list taped to the refrigerator. Halfway through organizing shelves, Carter disappeared into another room. There was 8-year-old Nolan wearing oversized glasses and missing 2 front teeth. "Dude, what?" You have to see these. He dumped the contents across the floor. Photo albums, old trophies, school notebooks, embarrassing childhood pictures. "Oh, absolutely not," he muttered. Too late. I'd already picked one up. My coffee mug somehow ended up beside Nolan's favorite one. "You were adorable." I was horrifying. "You looked happy." He glanced at the picture. For a second, something softened in his expression. "Yeah, I think your mom would love this one framed." He snatched it away. "You're never speaking of this again." "I'll absolutely be speaking of it." He groaned dramatically. This was a mistake. "No." I looked around at the scattered memories. It wasn't. He watched me for a moment, then quietly said, "I'm glad you're here." Just those 4 words. Simple. Honest. Something warm settled in my chest. I smiled without thinking. So am I. Neither of us realized then that this month wasn't going to be anything like we expected. We still believed we were just 2 friends sharing a house for a few weeks. If someone had told me that first evening where this story would eventually lead, I would have laughed and I would have been completely wrong. The second week was when living together stopped feeling temporary. At some point, the house quietly adjusted around us. My coffee mug somehow ended up beside Carter's favorite one. Every morning, Nolan leaned against the doorway carrying 2 glasses of lemonade. He stopped knocking before walking into my room. I stopped apologizing for taking up space. Without talking about it, we settled into habits that felt strangely natural. One afternoon, I looked up from my laptop and realized I hadn't thought about my apartment once all day. That should have been a good thing. Instead, it scared me a little. "You still working?" Carter leaned against the doorway, carrying 2 glasses of lemonade. "Unfortunately, you've been staring at the same screen for 3 hours. Apparently, it isn't. He walked over anyway and placed one of the glasses beside me. "You need a break. I have deadlines." "You've had deadlines since Tuesday." "Exactly." He folded his arms. "My offer still stands." "What offer?" "We're going kayaking." I blinked. "I never agreed to that." "You didn't disagree either." "I was hoping you'd forget." "I never forget fun." I noticed. He grinned. 30 minutes. "I need another hour." 30:45. He pretended to think. 35. I sighed dramatically. "You negotiate like a lawyer." "My uncle's a lawyer." "That explains everything." He pointed toward the hallway. 35. The lake was only 20 minutes away. Apparently, Carter had been coming here since he was a kid. Nolan had been coming here since he was a kid. Surprisingly, the silence never felt. I can tell he rented 2 kayaks before I had a chance to suggest sharing one, which honestly made me relax. Being too close to him all afternoon would have been distracting. Not because he was doing anything, just because he existed. That was enough lately. We paddled across calm water under a cloudless sky. For nearly an hour, neither of us talked much. Surprisingly, the silence never felt awkward. Nolan finally broke it. He laughed. "I like this version of you." I looked over. "This version, the relaxed one. I've always been relaxed." He laughed. "No, I have." "Sawyer, what?" "You answer emails like someone's life. Depends on your font choice. Typography matters. You alphabetize your spice rack. I like organization. You apologized to a chair yesterday. I bumped into it." He stared at me. "You apologized to furniture." I couldn't argue with that. It deserved respect. He laughed so hard his kayak drifted sideways. "You are unbelievable." Watching him laugh had become one of my favorite things. That realization arrived quietly, and I immediately pushed it away. No, absolutely not. I promised myself I wouldn't let this happen. He was my friend, nothing more. Keep it that way. That evening, we sat on the back porch watching the sun disappear behind the trees. Neither of us had turned on the lights. You ever think about moving? Nolan asked. I smiled. You ever think about moving? Carter asked. Eventually. Where? I don't know. Big city maybe? You? He shrugged. I've never really thought about leaving. You like it here. That's a very Nolan answer, or at least Nolan insisted it qualified. That's a very Carter answer. What does that mean? You like familiarity. So, do you? No. He looked at me. You've lived in 4 different cities. My parents moved a lot. Exactly. I got used to change. You got good at pretending change doesn't bother you. I frowned. What makes you say that? You never unpack everything. What? Every place you've lived. He looked toward the yard. You leave boxes closed. I stared at him. How do you know that? You still have one in your room. I blinked. He was right. There was still one unopened box in the corner. Books, old photographs, letters, things I'd never found the energy to unpack, I guess. I looked toward the yard. I always figured I'd leave again. He nodded slowly. Must be exhausting. Nobody had ever described it like that. Exhausting because it was keeping one foot outside every place you lived, never fully settling, never believing anything would last. I never thought about it. I did. He smiled slightly. I noticed things. That sentence stayed with me long after we went inside, because he did. He noticed everything. Things I didn't even notice about myself. I noticed you have gas. Or at least Carter insisted it qualified. My truck won't start. Yes? You sure? Sawyer, what? Yes. You sure? Parker, what? I'm offended. I asked a reasonable question. You assumed I forgot gas. I considered the possibility. He grabbed his keys. Come outside. The battery was dead. Apparently, he'd left the headlights on overnight. I couldn't stop smiling. What? You were offended. I still am. You forgot the headlights. I forgot one tiny thing. I folded my arms. The irony is beautiful. He pointed a finger at me. Don't enjoy this. I'm absolutely enjoying this. He laughed. I hate you. No, you don't. He looked at me for a second before smiling. No. He said it so naturally. No. Simple. Certain. It shouldn't have affected me, but it did more than it should have. That afternoon, we walked to the neighborhood grocery store instead. Neither of us minded. Nolan kept throwing random things into the shopping cart. We don't eat marshmallows. Carter kept throwing random things into the shopping cart. Frozen waffles. We already have waffles. Emergency waffles. We might. Nolan, what? The cashier laughed. We don't eat marshmallows. We might. Carter, what? You shop entirely based on optimism. He laughed. You shop like we're preparing for a hurricane. I'm practical. You're suspicious. I like being prepared for what? I don't know exactly. By the time we reached the checkout, the cart contained 3 different types of cereal because neither of us would compromise. The cashier smiled. You 2 brothers? Sorry. It's okay, Nolan said. The cashier laughed. Sorry. It's okay, Carter said. Outside, I carried 2 grocery bags while Nolan balanced the rest. Sawyer, what? Outside, I carried 2 grocery bags while Carter balanced the rest. You know what? I kind of see it. See what? The brother thing, I laughed. We don't look alike. No. He looked over. But apparently we have the same energy. What does that even mean? I have no idea. Neither did I. Still, for some reason, that conversation stayed with me. Sunday evening, I called my older sister. She answered on the second ring. So how's living with your famous best friend? I smiled. He's not famous. You talk about him enough. You've mentioned Nolan in every phone call for 6 months. I frowned. Really? Really? I leaned back against the bed. He's easy to live with. That's good. It feels... I stopped. What? I don't know. You do? I sighed. It feels comfortable. She was quiet. Then she asked very carefully, comfortable good? Yeah. I'm not doing this. You already are. No, Sawyer. She knew me too well. I'm not doing this. You already are. No, Parker. He's straight. I know. He's my friend. I know. I'm not ruining that. I didn't say you would. I rubbed my forehead. What? I don't want to start hoping for something impossible. Silence. Then my sister spoke softly. So don't. I won't. Just enjoy having a good friend. I can do that. Can you? I answered too quickly. Yes. After we hung up, I stared at the ceiling for a long time. Could I? I honestly wasn't sure anymore because something had shifted. Not between us, between me and my own thoughts. I caught myself looking forward to hearing his footsteps downstairs, laughing before he finished a joke because I already knew where he was going with it. Feeling disappointed when he spent an evening out with old friends instead of home. None of those feelings meant anything. At least, that's what I kept telling myself. Then, later that night, Nolan pushed the door open just enough to look inside. Yeah? Carter pushed the door open just enough to look inside. I couldn't sleep. Everything okay? He nodded. Just wanted to ask something. What? He hesitated. For the first time since I'd known him, he actually looked nervous. Do you think? He looked down for a second. This month's going by too fast. I smiled. Yeah, it kind of is. He leaned against the doorframe. I don't really want it to end. Neither did I, but I couldn't tell him that. Not the way I wanted to. So instead, I smiled. We've still got 2 weeks. He smiled back. Yeah, 2 weeks. Then he quietly wished me good night and disappeared down the hallway. I listened until I heard his bedroom door close. For reasons I couldn't explain, that simple conversation made it even harder to fall asleep. Nolan no longer asked if I wanted coffee in the morning. Curious, I walked down to the kitchen. It wasn't marked by a date on the calendar, it was marked by little things. Carter no longer asked if I wanted coffee in the morning. He simply made 2 cups. I stopped asking where he kept things in the kitchen because I already knew. We developed an unspoken routine where one of us cooked while the other cleaned, even though cooked usually meant trying not to ruin dinner. Somehow living together had become effortless. That was exactly what worried me. Nolan was dancing. The house fell silent. Well, not loud, just enough to drift through the hallway. Curious, I walked down to the kitchen. Carter was dancing. Or at least, that was what he claimed it wasn't. I wasn't dancing. You absolutely were. I was moving to music. Coincidence? I leaned against the doorway, smiling. You've got terrible rhythm. He pointed a wooden spoon at me. I have excellent rhythm. You almost tripped over the dishwasher. It surprised me. The dishwasher? Yes, it's been there all week. He laughed, shaking his head. I liked you better before you started making fun of me. No, you didn't. No, he smiled. I really didn't. The smell of tomato sauce filled the kitchen. I looked into the pot. That actually smells good. I followed a recipe. I didn't know you were capable of that. I evolved. I'll believe it when I taste it. He handed me a spoon. Taste. I did. Then looked at him. Okay. Good. Annoyingly good. His grin widened. I knew it. I hate admitting you're right. No, you don't. There it was again. That easy confidence. The way he answered as if he knew me. Maybe he did. After dinner, rain started unexpectedly. Heavy summer rain. The kind that made everything outside disappear behind silver curtains. Nolan said. That happened. It's kind of nice. Then went out completely. The house fell silent. Well, Carter said that happened. I'll find flashlights. I know where they are. He looked at me. You do? Garage. Second shelf. He blinked. You're right. I smiled. I live here too. The words slipped out before I could think. I live here too. Not technically, not permanently, but for a second. It felt true. Neither of us commented on it. Instead, we lit candles around the living room and sat near the large front window, Nolan admitted. Rain against windows. It's kind of nice, Carter admitted. The power outage, the quiet, I nodded. There aren't many places this quiet anymore. Wind moving through trees, thunder somewhere far away. Eventually, Nolan spoke. Thunder somewhere far away. Eventually, Carter spoke. When I was little, he smiled to himself. My mom used to make hot chocolate every time the power went out. Really? Said storms weren't scary if you had hot chocolate. Did it work? I don't know, he shrugged. I mostly remember the hot chocolate. I laughed. We have cocoa. His eyes lit up. We do. You bought emergency marshmallows. He looked offended. I told you those had a purpose. 20 minutes later, we were sitting on the living room floor, drinking hot chocolate by candlelight. Somehow, it felt less like 2 college friends and more like something neither of us had a name for. Comfortable, safe, quiet. I caught myself looking at him instead of the storm. He was staring out the window completely unaware. The candlelight softened everything. His expression, the line of his jaw, the way he absent-mindedly wrapped both hands around the mug. For one dangerous second, I wished time would stop. Then I forced myself to look away. The electricity came back after an hour. Neither of us moved immediately. We should probably turn off the candles, I finally said, probably. Neither of us stood up. I was thinking peaceful. I like your version better. The next morning, I woke earlier than usual. Sunlight filled my room. The house was quiet. As I walked downstairs, I stopped halfway. Eventually, Nolan laughed. Nolan had fallen asleep on the couch. The television still paused on some nature documentary we'd started after the power returned. He looked young, relaxed, completely different from the energetic guy everyone else knew. For a moment, I simply stood there, then quietly picked up the blanket and placed it over him. He stirred slightly, didn't wake up. I smiled to myself and headed toward the kitchen. You know, his sleepy voice made me jump. I was awake. I turned. You should have said something. I wanted to see what you'd do. I folded my arms. That's unfair. A little. He smiled without opening his eyes. Thanks for what? The blanket. It was cold. I know. There was something strangely gentle about the moment. Neither of us tried to make it funny. Friday evening, one arm hanging off the side, blanket half on the floor. Loud, funny, The kind of person who filled every room with conversation. Friday evening, Nolan's friend Damon stopped by unexpectedly. He looked from me to Nolan. What? You answer each other's questions? We do not. So you two are officially impossible to visit. Nolan frowned. I laughed. Carter rolled his eyes. Damon pointed dramatically between us. See? Nolan rolled his eyes. I've known you since middle school. Damon grinned. I noticed Carter hesitate. You've never let anyone stay here this long. Grant looked at me. I noticed Nolan hesitate. Did it? Yeah. Damon looked at me. The words weren't meant to mean anything, just teasing, but Nolan answered before I could. Barely noticeable. Grant smiled. I can see that. Then the conversation moved on, but my thoughts didn't. He is simple, natural, no hesitation. He is silence, tiny, barely noticeable. Damon smiled. Later that night, after Damon left, he talks too much, Carter muttered. A little. We cleaned up empty soda cans together. He talks too much. Carter looked embarrassed all over again. He didn't make things weird, did he? I tried to sound casual. No. You sure? Yeah. He nodded, relieved. Good. I wanted to ask special. What did you mean by that? Instead, I stayed quiet because I already knew the answer. He meant exactly what friends mean, nothing else. Anything beyond that existed only inside my own imagination. And that was the one place I couldn't afford to live. Saturday afternoon, we drove into town for a local summer festival. Food trucks, live music, small booths selling handmade crafts, Nolan muttered. This place gets bigger every year, Carter said. You've been every year, my whole life. You really never leave. He smiled. Nolan looked embarrassed all over again. Nolan said, You've been every year. At one point, I stopped to look at handmade wooden bookmarks. Carter disappeared. When he came back, he handed me a paper bag. What's this? Open it. Inside was the bookmark I'd been holding 5 minutes earlier. I looked at him. You bought it. You kept looking at it. You didn't have to. I wanted to. I ran my thumb across the carved wood. It wasn't expensive, probably less than $15, but somehow it felt incredibly thoughtful. You notice everything, I said quietly. He shrugged. I try. The words hit me harder than they should have because he really did. He noticed when I skipped lunch because I was working, when I looked tired before I admitted it, which songs I replayed while designing, which coffee I ordered without checking the menu. Tiny details, things most people never remembered, things that made me feel seen. I stopped to look at handmade wooden bookmarks. Nolan disappeared. Carter walked past my room and noticed you actually used it. Of course. I wasn't sure. I smiled. I'll probably keep it for years. He leaned against the doorframe. Good. There was that smile again, small, quiet, almost shy. Then he disappeared down the hallway. Nolan walked past my room and noticed you actually used it, staring at the closed door. My sister had been right. This was becoming dangerous. Not because Carter had changed. He hadn't. He was exactly the same thoughtful, kind, funny friend he'd always been. The problem was me. Every day it became a little harder to remember that kindness wasn't the same thing as love. This was becoming dangerous. Not because Nolan had changed. The third week began with something neither of us expected. Carter got sick. Not seriously, just one of those summer colds that seemed impossible until you actually caught one. I found him sitting at the kitchen table Monday morning looking miserable. You look terrible. He slowly lifted his head. Good morning to you too. I mean it. I know. His voice sounded rough. You okay? I've been better. I walked closer and instinctively rested the back of my hand against his forehead. You've definitely got a fever. The moment lasted less than 2 seconds. Then reality caught up with me. The third week began with something neither of us expected. Carter blinked. For what? I couldn't explain why I'd apologized. It had simply happened. He smiled weakly. I appreciate the diagnosis, doctor. I'm serious. So am I. He looked exhausted. I think I'm going back to bed. I'll make you tea. You don't have to. I know. He disappeared upstairs before arguing. I spent most of the morning working from the dining room instead of my bedroom. Not because I needed to, because I kept listening. Every little sound upstairs made me glance toward the staircase. Around noon, I heard footsteps. Carter appeared wearing the same hoodie as before. Nolan got sick. I stepped back immediately. I feel attacked. You look attacked. He laughed quietly before coughing. I definitely sound awful. You do. You enjoying this? A little liar. I smiled. Maybe a very little. He sat across from me while I made soup from whatever we could find in the kitchen. This smells decent. I can cook when necessary. I thought you only burned things. I adapt. He watched me for a moment, then said quietly, Thanks. I looked up. For what? For taking care of me. The words caught me off guard. I'm making soup. Exactly. I shrugged. You'd do the same. I would. He didn't hesitate. Not even for a second. Something about that certainly stayed with me. By Wednesday, he was feeling better. Enough to become annoying again. You've recovered remarkably fast. I missed bothering you. I noticed. He grinned. I think you secretly enjoyed playing nurse. I absolutely did not. You made me soup. You were sick. You checked my temperature. You looked terrible. You worried. I was being responsible. He folded his arms. If you say so. I changed the subject before he could smile like that again. Thursday evening, we decided to organize old board games we'd found in the basement. There were dozens, most missing pieces, some older than we were. Carter held up one dusty box. You ever play this? No. Perfect. What if it's impossible? We'll invent rules. That's cheating. Sorry. Nolan blinked. An hour later, we were laughing too hard to continue because neither of us had any idea what the original rules had actually been. This game makes no sense. Neither do your made-up rules. They're excellent. They're illegal. He pointed dramatically across the table. You just don't appreciate innovation. I appreciate surviving. He laughed again. That laugh. I had started recognizing it before it happened. The tiny smile first, then the eyes, then the laugh itself. I hated that I noticed things like that. Friday afternoon, Carter disappeared after lunch. When he returned 2 hours later, he carried a paper bag. What's that? Nolan appeared wearing the same hoodie as before. No, you're smiling. I always smile. Not like that. He sighed dramatically. You asked too many questions. I learned from you. He pulled a small box from the bag. I stopped by the bookstore. I looked at him. So he slid the box toward me. You mentioned your headphones were dying. I stared at it. Carter, what? You bought me headphones? They were on sale. I can buy my own. I know. Nolan held up one dusty box. You really didn't have to. He shrugged like it was nothing. I wanted to. Those same words again. I wanted to. They were becoming dangerous. You've already done enough. What does that mean? The bookmark, the groceries, everything. He looked genuinely confused. Parker, what? We're friends. I know. This is what friends do. Was it? Maybe. Friday afternoon, Nolan disappeared after lunch. One where someone noticed tiny problems before I mentioned them. One where kindness came without expecting anything back. Maybe this was completely normal. Maybe I'd simply forgotten what effortless friendship looked like. I hope that was true because the alternative hurt too much. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because of the headphones, because of something my sister had once said. The hardest crushes aren't on people who treat you badly. She'd been drinking coffee while I complained about someone years earlier. They're on people who treat you wonderfully. Why? Because they never actually do anything wrong. I'd laughed at the time. Now, lying awake in the dark, I finally understood. Carter wasn't giving me mixed signals. He wasn't flirting. He wasn't leading me on. He was simply kind. Consistently, I stared at it. Nolan. That somehow made everything worse because there was nothing to blame. Not him, not anyone. Just unfortunate timing. Unfortunate feelings. Saturday morning, we drove to a nearby hiking trail. Halfway through the walk, we reached a wooden lookout platform overlooking miles of forest. The view was incredible. Carter leaned against the railing. I come here whenever I need to think. What? He looked genuinely confused. Sawyer, what? The wind moved through the trees below us. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. Finally, he broke the silence. You've been quiet lately. My stomach tightened. Have I? Yeah. I'm just tired. He looked at me carefully. It was the kind of look that made me nervous. Not because it was romantic, because it was observant. I don't think that's it. I forced a smile. You always think too much. So, do you? He didn't let it go. Something bothering you? The truthful answer sat painfully close to the surface. Yes, you. Not because you'd done anything, because you'd been yourself. Instead, I looked back toward the trees. I'm just thinking about going back. His expression softened. The apartment. Yeah, you don't want to. I laughed quietly. My roommates definitely don't miss me. I wasn't asking about them. I understood what he meant. Neither of us mentioned the house, the routines, the mornings, the quiet evenings. Instead, I simply shrugged. I guess this month went by fast. He looked out across the valley. I've been thinking the same thing. His voice sounded different, quieter, more thoughtful. I got used to you being around. My heart skipped once. Then I reminded myself, friends. He meant friends, nothing more. I got used to you too. That much, at least, was completely true. On the drive home, we listened to music instead of talking. One song ended, another began. Then, without taking his eyes off the road, Carter asked, "Promise me something." What? When you move back? Nolan wasn't giving me mixed signals. The view was incredible. What, you know? He shrugged. Life gets busy. People stop calling. I don't want that. His words were simple, honest. There wasn't a hint of hesitation in them. I don't either. Promise. I smiled. I promise. He smiled back. Good. Outside, the trees slipped past the windows one after another. Inside the truck, I suddenly realized something that hurt more than I expected. The end of the month was only a few days away, and I wasn't ready to leave. Not because of the house, because somewhere along the way, without ever meaning to, it had started feeling like leaving him. The final week arrived quietly. Too quietly. Neither of us mentioned it. Neither of us looked at the calendar anymore, as if pretending the days weren't passing would somehow slow them down. It didn't. Monday morning started differently. I came downstairs expecting to make coffee. Instead, Carter was already sitting at the kitchen island. Nolan leaned against the railing. "You okay?" He looked over and smiled. "Yeah, you don't sound convincing." He rubbed the back of his neck. "Couldn't sleep." "Me neither." The words slipped out before I realized what I'd admitted. He looked at me for a second. "Really?" I nodded. "Too much on your mind?" "Something like that." Neither of us asked the obvious question. Instead, I made coffee. For a while, we stood side by side in comfortable silence. Then Carter quietly said, "It's weird. What is the house?" I looked at him. Then, without taking his eyes off the road, Nolan asked, "You noticed that too?" He nodded. "Yeah." Neither of us explained what we meant. We didn't need to. The countdown had started, whether we acknowledged it or not. Tuesday afternoon, I was packing some things into my suitcase. Not because I was leaving yet, just organizing. Carter appeared in my doorway. "What are you doing?" "Nothing." That looks Instead, Nolan was already sitting at the kitchen island. "I'm just putting clothes away." He stayed there for several seconds. "I don't like seeing the suitcase." I smiled sadly. "I wasn't planning on leaving today." "I know." He looked down at the floor. "It still feels weird." There was something about the way he said it. Not dramatic, not emotional, just honest. "I'll still be 20 minutes away." "I know." "We'll still hang out." "I know." "So, what's wrong?" He was quiet. Finally, he shrugged. I guess he laughed softly at himself. "I got spoiled. Spoiled having my best friend around every day." Those words should have made me happy. Instead, they hurt because that was exactly what I was. His best friend. Nothing less, nothing more. Wednesday evening, we ordered takeout instead of cooking. Halfway through dinner, Carter suddenly asked, then Nolan quietly said, "It's weird, just organizing." Nolan appeared in my doorway. Halfway through dinner, Nolan suddenly asked, "Anything serious?" "Not really." He nodded thoughtfully. "What about you?" "A couple relationships. I remember one." "Emily?" "Yeah." He smiled. "She was nice." "She was? What happened?" He shrugged. "We wanted different lives." I waited. After a moment, he continued. "She wanted someone who planned everything. You don't." "I plan." He smiled. "Just smaller things." That sounded exactly like him. "What do you want?" He looked genuinely caught off guard. "I don't know." "You've never thought about it?" "Not much." He leaned back in his chair. "I guess." He looked toward the window. "I just want home to feel peaceful." Something about that answer settled quietly inside me. It wasn't ambitious. It wasn't dramatic. It was simply Carter. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "So do I." Thursday afternoon, his mother called. I could hear part of the conversation from the living room. "Everything okay?" "Yeah, we've been fine. He hasn't burned the kitchen down." I smiled to myself. "No, Mom. I'll ask." A moment later, Carter walked into the room holding out his phone. "My mom wants to talk to you." I blinked. "You've dated much?" The question surprised me. It wasn't dramatic. It was simply Nolan. "Parker." She sounded exactly as warm as I remembered. "Carter tells me you've been taking wonderful care of the house." A moment later, Nolan walked into the room holding out his phone. I glanced toward Carter. He looked embarrassed. I took the phone. "Hi, Mrs. Parker. Sawyer. Nolan tells me you've been taking wonderful care of the house. We've both been trying and taking care of him, too. I'm really glad he invited you." I stayed quiet. He sounded happier this month. I looked toward the kitchen where Carter was pretending not to listen. "He's made this house feel alive again." Something caught in my throat. "Thank you. We've both enjoyed it." "I know." Her voice softened. "I hope you two stay close." I glanced toward Nolan. I looked toward the kitchen where Nolan was pretending not to listen. "What did she say?" "That you're impossible." He laughed. "That sounds like her." I didn't tell him the rest because somehow those words felt too personal. Friday evening became one of those nights I'd remember long after the details faded. When I handed the phone back, Nolan raised an eyebrow. Neither of us spoke for several minutes. Finally, Carter broke the silence. "You know what I'll miss?" "What? Coming home and knowing you're here?" My heartbeat stumbled. "I'll miss that too." He smiled faintly. "The house is going to be really quiet." "It probably will." Neither of us spoke for several minutes. Finally, Nolan broke the silence. "I don't think I have." "You have?" He didn't smile this time. "I'm serious." I searched for something light to say, couldn't find it. Instead, I quietly answered, "So, have you?" He looked at me. Neither of us spoke. The silence wasn't awkward. It simply felt full, like there were things neither of us knew how to say. Eventually, Carter stood. "We should probably go inside." "Yeah." Neither of us moved immediately. Saturday morning, my last full day. I woke, it simply felt full, like there were things neither of us knew how to say. Eventually, Nolan stood. I already knew tomorrow I'd be carrying my suitcase down those stairs for the last time. The thought made my chest ache. I walked into the kitchen. Carter was already there. Of course he was. He looked up and smiled. Morning. Morning. For a second, we simply looked at each other. I walked into the kitchen. No one was already there. Let's not waste today. I wasn't planning to. He grabbed his truck keys. No phones. Okay, no work. Deal. No thinking about tomorrow. That one hurt, but I smiled anyway. I'll try. He grinned. Come on. We spent the entire day driving with no destination, stopping at tiny roadside diners, walking through little antique stores, watching a local baseball game we'd only accidentally discovered, buying ice cream even though neither of us was particularly hungry, laughing more than either of us had all week. Every few minutes, I'd catch myself thinking, remember this. Remember exactly this. The sound of his laugh. The way he always held doors open without realizing it. How he smiled whenever he saw dogs. How he drummed his fingers against the steering wheel whenever his favorite songs came on. Tiny details. The kind people usually forgot. I already knew I never would. That evening, driving home with the windows down, Carter quietly said, "Today was good." Yeah. It was. That evening, driving home with the windows down, no one quietly said, "Today was good." Yeah, it was. Because it was finally impossible to pretend otherwise. Tomorrow. I wasn't just leaving a house. I was leaving the happiest month I'd had in years. And I had absolutely no idea how to go back to pretending that 1 month hadn't changed everything inside me. Sunday arrived far too quickly. I woke before my alarm. For a few seconds, I forgot. Then I saw the packed suitcase standing beside the bedroom door. Reality returned all at once. Today, I was leaving. I carried my bags downstairs just after 9 o'clock. Carter was already in the kitchen. Nolan was already in the kitchen. Coffee, please. Neither of us mentioned why the rooms suddenly felt different. We moved through the morning almost mechanically. Coffee, toast. Cleaning dishes that were already clean. Checking things that didn't need checking. Anything to avoid acknowledging what was happening. Anything to avoid acknowledging what was happening. Finally, no one broke the silence. Around noon, he nodded. Okay, that was all. Just okay. Loading the truck took less than 5 minutes. 1 suitcase, 2 backpacks, a box of books. It amazed me that an entire month could fit into so little luggage. The house looked exactly the same as the day I'd arrived, only it didn't feel the same. Not anymore. Not anymore. No one closed the tailgate. No. He smiled sadly. Me neither. The drive back to my apartment felt much shorter than the first drive to his house. Or maybe neither of us wanted to notice the time passing. The radio played quietly. Neither of us paid attention. Neither of us paid attention. About halfway there, I frowned. For what? You said you'd cook 1 successful dinner before leaving. I laughed. I completely forgot. I didn't. I technically made soup. You heated soup. I improved it, barely. For the first time all morning, both of us laughed. The heaviness lifted just a little. I'm still expecting dinner. I'll make you dinner. You promise? I promise? He nodded once. I'm holding you to that. When we reached my apartment building, neither of us rushed. He helped carry everything upstairs. My roommates were both home. One looked up from the couch. Dude, he grinned. You actually came back. I considered staying gone forever. I would have understood. The apartment somehow looked smaller than I remembered. Messier, louder. No one spoke. No one placed my suitcase beside my bedroom door. Carter placed my suitcase beside my bedroom door. Well, well. Neither of us moved. No one rubbed the back of his neck, probably sensing the moment. Carter rubbed the back of his neck. I guess. He smiled. I'll see you soon. Yeah, soon. He held out his hand almost automatically. I looked at it, then laughed quietly. What? We're really shaking hands. He looked embarrassed. I don't know. Without thinking, I stepped forward and hugged him. It lasted only a couple of seconds. Nothing dramatic. Just a hug between friends. When we stepped apart, he smiled. That was less awkward. A lot less. He laughed. I'll text you later. I know. Then he left. I stood by the window until his truck disappeared around the corner. Only then did I realize how quiet the apartment suddenly felt, even with 3 other people inside. The first week back was harder than I expected. Not because anything was wrong, because everything felt off. Monday morning, I automatically waited for someone else to make coffee. Nobody did. Tuesday, I caught myself setting out 2 plates before realizing I lived alone again. Thursday evening, my phone buzzed. No one. I bought frozen waffles. Emergency waffles. I stood in the grocery store laughing at myself. People probably thought I was crazy. Thursday evening, my phone buzzed. Carter, how's apartment life? I smiled before answering loud. His reply came almost instantly. Mine's too quiet. I stared at the screen, then typed. Miss having someone around. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally. Yeah, more than I expected. How's apartment life? One Tuesday evening after dinner at my apartment, over the next 2 weeks, we kept our promise. Dinner every Tuesday, basketball on Fridays, even though I mostly watched coffee on Sunday mornings. Nothing changed, except something had changed. We were trying very hard to pretend it hadn't. One Tuesday evening, after dinner at my apartment, Carter stayed later than usual. Neither of us seemed eager for the night to end. I should probably head home. Probably. He didn't stand. Instead, he looked around my apartment. You unpacked everything. I followed his eyes. The last unopened box gone. Books on shelves, pictures on the wall, letters tucked into a drawer. I smiled. I noticed that too. You finally unpacked. Yeah. He looked at me curiously. What changed? The answer escaped before I could stop it. I stopped feeling like I was going to leave. Silence. He looked at me for a long moment, then smiled. I'm glad. After he left, I realized something. He'd been right weeks ago. I'd always left boxes packed because I expected every place to be temporary. Somewhere during that month, that feeling had disappeared. Not because of the house, because someone had quietly convinced me that staying somewhere wasn't such a frightening idea. A few days later, my sister invited me for coffee. She took one look at me and smiled. So you look happier. I am, and sadder, I sighed. Is it that obvious? She stirred her coffee. How often do you see him? 3 or 4 times a week? Her eyebrows rose. That's still a lot. We're friends. I know. We promised we'd stay close. And have you? Yeah, she smiled. Good. I looked out the cafe window. I thought leaving would make everything easier. Nolan stayed later than usual. But if I ever tell him, she interrupted gently. She nodded slowly. Because now you know exactly what you're missing. I looked down at my coffee. I wish I didn't feel like this. I know. I don't want to lose him. Sawyer. That Saturday, she interrupted gently. Parker. I looked up. You don't have to decide today. Maybe not. But every day, the words became a little harder to keep inside. That Saturday, Carter invited me over for dinner. Walking back into his parents' house felt strangely familiar, like I'd only been gone a day. He opened the front door before I even knocked. I saw your car. Creepy. I was waiting. The words came so naturally that neither of us noticed them at first. I was waiting. Nolan invited me over for dinner. Later, as I was leaving, Nolan walked me to my car. We still argued over recipes, still laughed at stupid jokes, still somehow burned garlic bread. Nothing had changed. Everything had changed. Later, as I was leaving, Carter walked me to my car. The evening air was cool. Neither of us spoke immediately. Finally, he said, "You know what? I'm really glad we didn't go back to seeing each other once a month." I smiled. Me too. He looked at me with that same thoughtful expression I'd come to know so well. I don't think I could have done that. My heartbeat quickened. I would have missed you too much. The words hung between us. Simple, honest, perfectly innocent. And somehow, they were the closest either of us had ever come to saying something neither of us fully understood. I drove home that night with my hands tight on the steering wheel. Nolan still came over every Tuesday. I wasn't afraid of my feelings anymore. I was afraid of what would happen if they kept growing. For the next 3 weeks, nothing happened. At least, nothing anyone else would have noticed. Carter still came over every Tuesday. I still drove to his house on Saturdays. We still argued about food, still watched terrible movies. One Friday evening, Nolan texted me. If someone looked at us from the outside, they'd see exactly what we'd always been. 2 close friends. Only I knew how much work it had become to keep acting like that was enough. One Friday evening, Carter texted me. Busy tomorrow? Not really. Drive with me? Where? No idea yet. I smiled. Sounds like your kind of plan. His reply came immediately. Exactly. The next morning, we drove for almost 2 hours before ending up back at the same lake where we'd gone kayaking during that first week. I laughed when I recognized it. Usually that joke made him laugh. This time, it didn't. I thought we were driving nowhere. We are, he smiled. I just happened to end up here. Sure. He looked almost nervous. That caught my attention. You okay? Yeah. You don't look convinced. He stared across the water for several seconds, then quietly said, I've been thinking. That's dangerous. Usually that joke made him laugh. This time it didn't. Parker. Something in his voice made my stomach tighten. What? I need to ask you something. I nodded. Okay. He took a slow breath. When you lived with me, I waited. Were you really happy? The question surprised me. I was, I think. He looked down at the dock beneath our feet. I think that was the happiest month I've had in a really long time. I smiled sadly. Mine too. He nodded. I figured. Silence settled between us. The breeze moved gently across the lake. Finally, he spoke again. Ever since you moved back, he rubbed his hands together. Nothing feels quite right. My heart started beating faster. I keep expecting to hear you upstairs. I still make too much coffee. I catch myself talking out loud because I think you're working in the next room. He laughed quietly, then looked at me. I miss living with my best friend, Sawyer. Eventually, Nolan stopped. Sawyer, he was telling the truth. Every word. I knew that. The problem was, I wasn't sure mine was the same truth. We walked along the shoreline afterward. Neither of us talked much. Eventually, Carter stopped. Parker, I turned toward him. I've got another question. What is it? He looked strangely uncertain. If this makes things weird, it won't. He smiled faintly. You always say that. I know. He took a slow breath. Can I ask something personal? Yeah. He hesitated long enough that I almost spoke first. Instead, I turned toward him. Damon mentioned somebody asked you out. Have you been avoiding dating? Everything inside me froze. Nolan looked back toward the lake. I haven't. You've turned people down. I stared at him. How do you know that? Grant mentioned somebody asked you out. Oh, I hadn't realized word traveled that far. Carter looked back toward the lake. I was just wondering why. There it was, the moment. Maybe not the one I'd imagined, but close enough. I could lie, say I was busy, say work came first, say I simply wasn't interested. Instead, I heard myself quietly answer, because I already liked someone. He slowly turned toward me. Neither of us moved. Oh. He looked back at the water again. After several seconds, he asked, do I know him? Every instinct told me to say no. Protect the friendship. Protect him. Protect myself. Instead, I nodded. Yeah, silence. A long one. So, his voice was barely above a whisper. Who is it? I closed my eyes for 1 second, then opened them again. There wasn't going to be a better moment. There isn't an easy way to say this. His expression changed. Not fear, not panic, just complete attention. It's you. The words finally existed outside my head. I know you're straight. I know you never gave me a reason to think otherwise. I know this isn't your fault. Nolan didn't move, didn't interrupt. I never wanted to make things uncomfortable. My voice almost disappeared. I couldn't keep pretending anymore. The world became impossibly quiet. Carter didn't move, didn't even blink. I turned away, started walking toward the parking lot because I honestly believed that was the end. Sawyer, his voice stopped me. I laughed softly. I wanted to stop lying to my best friend. I turned away, started walking toward the parking lot because I honestly believed that was the end. Parker, his voice stopped me. I looked back. He was still standing exactly where I'd left him, looking completely overwhelmed. He shook his head. I don't know what to say. It's okay. No. He looked frustrated with himself. It's not. He walked over slowly. He searched for words. I've never thought about another long silence. Finally, he laughed once, mostly at himself. I think I've been asking myself the wrong question. I frowned. What do you mean? I kept asking why I missed you so much. He looked directly at me. I kept telling myself it was because you're my best friend. He swallowed. Maybe that's still true. Maybe it's something else. I stared at him. He looked almost embarrassed. I honestly don't know. I've never had to think about any of this before. I've never looked at a guy and wondered anything. He smiled nervously. Until you. Neither of us spoke. I don't know what that means. He looked completely honest. I really don't. But I know this. He stepped one little pace closer. When you told me you liked someone, he laughed quietly. I was really hoping it was me. My breath caught. What? I didn't understand why. I still don't. But when you said my name, he smiled. I wasn't scared. Another tiny step. I don't have answers. Nolan's voice was calm now. The lake, the trees, the wind. All I could hear was my own heartbeat. I don't have answers. Carter's voice was calm now. I'm not going to pretend I suddenly understand myself. I don't. But I know I don't want to lose you. You won't. I know. He smiled. I also know I don't want to spend the rest of my life wondering what would have happened if I walked away today for the first time all afternoon. I smiled, a real one. So he laughed nervously. I have absolutely no idea how this works. I don't either. I've never done this before. I know. He rubbed the back of his neck. Can we, he searched for the right words, figure it out slowly. Hope felt dangerous. But this wasn't a promise. It wasn't certainty. It was honesty. Then Nolan opened his arms slightly. I'd like that. He smiled. So would I? For a second, neither of us moved. Then Carter opened his arms slightly. Can I? I laughed. You have to stop asking permission to hug me. He smiled. I figured I'd start. I stepped forward. We hugged. Nothing dramatic, nothing cinematic, just two people who had finally stopped pretending. They didn't matter more to each other than either of them had been willing to admit. When we stepped apart, he smiled again. So you still owe me dinner? I laughed. Seriously? You promised? I did. He pointed toward the truck. Come on. What? I'm starving. You just had an emotional breakthrough. Yeah, he grinned. Those make me hungry. I shook my head, laughing all the way back to the truck. Months later, people kept asking us when we officially started dating. Neither of us ever had a good answer, because the truth was, it didn't begin the day I confessed. It didn't begin beside that lake. It didn't even begin the day I moved into his parents' house. It started much earlier with one simple sentence: "Come live with me for a month." Neither of us knew it then, but somewhere between burnt dinners, emergency waffles, rainy evenings, quiet mornings, and one house that slowly began to feel like home, two best friends found something neither of them had been looking for. And for the first time in my life, leaving wasn't the ending. It was simply the beginning. 3 months later, that's when everything finally started feeling real. Not because something dramatic happened. There were conversations, lots of them. Some awkward, some funny, some lasting until 2 o'clock in the morning because Nolan would stop halfway through a sentence and admit, some awkward, some funny, some lasting until 2 o'clock in the morning because Carter would stop halfway through a sentence and admit, "I've literally never thought about this before." And I'd answer, "I know. I'm not expecting you to have everything figured out. I just want you to be honest." He always was. If he felt confused, he said so. If something scared him, he admitted it. If he needed time, he asked for it. And somehow, honesty made everything easier. The first person he told was his mother. He called me afterward. I survived. I laughed. That bad? No. He sounded almost offended. Actually, he paused. She asked why it took me so long. What? I asked her what she meant, and he laughed quietly. She said she hadn't known who I'd eventually fall in love with. My heart skipped, but she'd known for weeks that I was already in love. I sat in complete silence. What did you say? I asked how. Another laugh. She said she'd never seen me smile that much after someone moved out. I covered my face with one hand. That's embarrassing. It gets worse. Oh no. She also said I hadn't stopped talking about you. I couldn't help smiling. Apparently, I wasn't subtle. No. He smiled through the phone. Neither of us were. We still took things slowly. Nothing about our friendship disappeared. If anything, it became stronger. We still argued over recipes, still burned garlic bread, still fought over which movie to watch, still bought too much cereal. One evening, while making dinner at my apartment, Nolan suddenly looked around the kitchen. Carter suddenly looked around the kitchen. What? He smiled. I just realized something. What? I've stopped saying your apartment. I blinked. You have? Yeah, he laughed softly. I keep calling it home. The words settled between us. Home. Months earlier, Nolan showed up outside my apartment just after 8 o'clock in the morning. The first snowfall covered everything overnight. Carter showed up outside my apartment just after 8 o'clock in the morning. I opened the door. What are you doing here? He held up 2 coffees. Emergency. What kind of emergency? He grinned. It's snowing. I looked outside. It is. I figured you'd want to see it. I can literally see it from my window. I know, he smiled. I just wanted an excuse. I laughed. Come inside. He stepped into the apartment immediately, taking off his boots. You know, he looked around. I still think your roommates are terrible. They moved out. I know, he smiled. I just enjoy saying it. The apartment felt different now. Quieter, cleaner, peaceful. He noticed. You unpacked everything. I told you. No. He looked carefully around the room. I mean, everything. He was right. There wasn't a single sealed box left. Not one. I hadn't even realized it. Spring came, then another summer. Exactly 1 year after he invited me to stay for a month, the hallway, the photographs, the kitchen, everything looked exactly the same. This time for a weekend. The moment we walked inside, we both stopped. The hallway, the photographs, the kitchen, everything looked exactly the same. Carter smiled. Feels familiar. Yeah. He walked into the kitchen and opened a cabinet, then laughed. What? He held up an unopened bag of marshmallows. The emergency ones. I started laughing too. They're still here. My dad definitely forgot about them. He placed the bag on the counter. You know what? I'm really glad my truck battery died. I looked at him, confused. What? If it hadn't? He smiled. You never would have laughed at me. I shook my head. That's your favorite memory? No. He stepped closer. My favorite memory is opening this front door and saying, he looked directly at me, welcome home. My chest tightened. I remember. I didn't know it then. He smiled, but I wasn't talking about the house. I couldn't stop smiling. I know. He took my hand. I think I knew before I understood. So did I. We stood quietly in the same kitchen where we'd burned our first dinner together. The same kitchen where we'd learned each other's routines. Nolan smiled. Sometimes people ask me when I knew I loved Nolan. Sometimes people ask me when I knew I loved Carter. They expect a dramatic answer, a confession, a hug, a moment beside the lake. They're always surprised when I tell them the truth. It wasn't any of those things.
It was a Tuesday morning.
Before I said a single word, Nolan placed a mug of coffee in front of me exactly the way I liked it. He hadn't asked, he'd simply remembered. That's when I realized something. Love isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just someone quietly learning your routines and making space for you inside theirs. Everything else came later. The confession, the questions, the uncertainty, the courage. But love had already been there, hidden inside burnt dinners, emergency waffles, rainy nights, thoughtful gifts, unpacked boxes, and one simple invitation that changed both our lives forever. Come live with me for 1 month. Neither of us knew it then, but we never really stopped living together after that. We just finally found the courage to call it home.